By the time Kingdom Hearts had released in 2002, the concept of the Superboss had been well established within not just the role-playing genre, but video gaming as a whole. It meant the developers had plenty of sources of inspiration to pull from, and as they looked to create encounters that would challenge players beyond what could be found from the bosses faced as part of standard progression, this was evidenced pretty well. Now, it should be noted that not every Kingdom Hearts game has had super bosses that have been rage-inducing, with Kingdom Hearts 358 over 2 days acting as the perfect example. In that particular game, the Dust Fly was available to fight as an optional boss, and it could be found in Twilight Town during Mission 89, but the challenge it presented paled in comparison to the 7 super bosses featured on this list, and in that regard, we're going to kick things off with Sephiroth from the original Kingdom Hearts. Sephiroth has become an infamous figure in the realm of video gaming due to his imposing and powerful appearance in Final Fantasy VII, and as Nomura and the wider writing staff discussed potential characters to appear in the original game, due to that imposing nature and the rivalry with Cloud Strife, Sephiroth was one of the perfect candidates. However, he did not appear in the Japanese version of Kingdom Hearts, and was only added in later as the game was being prepared for international release. Borrowing from the approach Square had taken with Final Fantasy VII and X, Nomura and the development staff used the time afforded due to the localization process to balance the game and add some extra content into Kingdom Hearts for its release in Europe and North America. This content would then be used as the basis for a re-release of Kingdom Hearts in Japan. It would be called Kingdom Hearts Final Mix as opposed to Kingdom Hearts International, as Nomura didn't like to use the international tagline, and it would feature even more content layered over what had been added for the Western versions. One of the additional pieces of content added for the Western versions was a fight against Sephiroth. It could be initiated at the Olympus Coliseum after the keyhole had been locked in Hollow Bastion, and it was called the Platinum Match. Many went into this encounter thinking it would be fun to square off against the classic antagonist from Final Fantasy VII, but what greeted them was a brutal encounter that was not for the faint of heart. Unlike many of the other encounters featured throughout Kingdom Hearts, the Platinum Match had to be fought with Sora alone, and it's for that reason that optimal gear such as the ultimate weapon, plenty of elixirs, and a high-tier accessory that reduced fire or elemental damage was necessary. Due to his superiority, Sephiroth would often saunter around the arena during the first phase, but when he took action, it would be short and swift. And due to the incredible rage of the Masamune, it could often catch players unawares. After taking enough damage to enter into the second phase, Sephiroth would start using Heartless Angel, a devastating move that would reduce MP to 0 and HP to 1, and it would be followed up promptly by a melee strike that could bring about a quick defeat if not evaded. Sephiroth would also start teleporting and running around the battlefield, fighting with a bit more urgency to show respect for Sora. As part of the final phase, Sephiroth would use the dreaded Supernova, which summoned numerous meteors to create shockwaves. These then served as a distraction for the main event, a large spherical object that Sephiroth would hurl at Sora to deal massive damage. All things considered, it made defeating Sephiroth quite tough, and although many other super bosses have since graced the Kingdom Hearts franchise that are even tougher, back in the day, being able to defeat Sephiroth earned a lot of credibility. For the release of Kingdom Hearts 2, the development team decided to take a similar approach. Kingdom Hearts 2 Final Mix would be exclusive to Japan, and it would feature a ton of extra content that did not exist in the base game, including a load of new boss fights. One of them could be accessed from King Mickey's castle after completing every world and beating the game, and it would see Sora square off against Lingering Will. This would serve as the ultimate challenge for those who felt they had mastered combat in Kingdom Hearts 2, as Lingering Will would be able to perform moves in a perfect manner. It meant that even though they were easy to learn, the way Lingering Will executed the moves made them very difficult to counter. Not only that, as the developers wanted Lingering Will to be a stern test, they made him impossible to interrupt when performing any kind of move, and also made him invulnerable to damage. Much like Sora, Lingering Will could also use combo attacks, making evasion critical to avoiding huge chunks of damage, but that evasion was tough, as Lingering Will had incredible mobility and could easily take you by surprise. And then there was Lingering Will's berserk-like state, which would make combos even more lethal and erratic. In short, this boss encounter was rough, and there were numerous mechanics stacked against the player, but after practicing the right timing and learning when you could and couldn't block, Lingering Will could be defeated, and you, the player, could breathe a huge sigh of relief. Kingdom Hearts Birth by Sleep featured quite a few Superbosses across both its original release and its final mix version, and one of the more punishing was Vanitas Remnant. Vanitas Remnant could be fought in the Badlands area of the Keyblade Graveyard after clearing the final episode, and the player would be able to choose who they used for the fight. But no matter who they chose, D-Links would not be accessible, with the player having to rely on command styles and shot locks to aid them throughout. One of the interesting mechanics in play was Vanitas Remnant's ability to mimic commands. It would make curing via items essential, as if the player was seen using a cure spell, Vanitas Remnant would mimic and cure themselves. And that was actually a crucial mechanic for success, using scenery to avoid facing your enemy head on and using various moves to get out of the way quickly. Should that not be possible, it's a particularly brutal fight, as Vanitas Remnant would use various dark variant moves to deal considerable amounts of damage relentlessly. But if you could get the timing down and overcome the mechanics, or exploit Vanitas' weakness by blocking his line of sight, victory would surely be yours. Sephiroth was not the only boss that became available for Japanese gamers to enjoy when Kingdom Hearts Final Mix was released, as the developers included another interesting surprise, an optional boss called the Unknown. At the time, this particular boss was introduced with zero context as to who they were in the wider scheme of the franchise, and they would be encountered by heading to the Castle Chapel in Hollow Bastion and stepping into the Dark Portal. Using red energy blades that looked not too dissimilar from a Sith lightsaber, the Unknown would be able to deal considerable amounts of damage, and they would also be able to summon barriers that would make them impervious to certain types of attack. After dealing a certain amount of damage, the Unknown would start to teleport around the arena and summon blades that would be subsequently tossed at Sora, but the next phase was the one that could really complicate the fight, as it messed up your command options, requiring the player to make sure they hit the right one to avoid being shocked. One of the ways to ensure success was to use Tinkerbell and make sure to use Strike Raid as much as possible, but either way, it was a tough mechanical fight that would keep you on your toes. Even though Kingdom Hearts 0.2 was a small experience in the grand scheme of things, it still included one of the Superbosses that many feel is up there as one of the best fights in the history of the franchise, Zodiac Phantom Aqua. Even though the boss fight was remarkably difficult, what made it such an interesting prospect was that it was the kind of boss where, after being defeated, you'd feel like you knew where it went wrong, something that would tease you to just having one more go to see if you could overcome that specific obstacle. As such, it's a boss fight that rewards those who have mastered the gameplay, but to even have a chance to test yourself, first you would need to take part in the Zodiac boss rush housed in the world within and make your way through the entire gauntlet. You'd then be greeted by a powered up version of Phantom Aqua that would lull first timers into a full sense of security by appearing vulnerable. But it would feature more health, teleport, and attack in retaliation, and in general have access to a wider range of attacks to catch you unawares, many of which could not be blocked. And as they could deal considerable damage, they would need to be evaded to avoid a game over. The fight was split into two phases, with the second being a considerable hike up in challenge, especially due to Aqua's Spellweaver phase, but it was beatable, and doing so would highlight a mastery of this particular game's combat mechanics. Next, we have the mysterious figure, who after being absent from the Japanese release of Kingdom Hearts Birth by Sleep, was added into the Western release and then Birth by Sleep Final Mix. The mysterious figure could be fought in the Land of Departure after defeating Vanitas Remnant, and it would see you square off against a ruthless enemy that wielded energy blades. They would use a wide array of attacks that, if not blocked or dodged, would often result in the fight concluding in an instant due to their power. The challenge, outside of dealing with how unnaturally fast the mysterious figure was, then became learning the setup cues and timings for the moves, as the mysterious figure could use a considerable amount of them, and the volume only increased as the fight continued. And perhaps the worst move was Doom. If this move landed, the player would be hit with a 5-second countdown, with the only method of escape being to mash a button as quickly as possible. If unsuccessful, the fight would conclude, but even if successful, every subsequent time Doom landed, the countdown would be 1 second shorter, to the point where it would become impossible to escape in time. The mysterious figure could also have its AI shifted by using movement commands, which further complicated the fight, making it a tough encounter to master. Due to how difficult the mysterious figure was in the Western version, it was actually nerfed for Final Mix to make it much more fair. And that brings us onto our last entry, which is also the most recent superboss to have existed within the Kingdom Hearts franchise, Yozora, who was introduced in Kingdom Hearts 3 Remind. After being introduced in the main game as part of Virum Rex, Yozora was then seen in the game's secret movie before appearing in Remind, a secret episode, as an optional boss. Upon initiating the encounter, which would take place on a rooftop in Quadratum, players would be in for quite possibly the sternest test across the entire franchise, and one of the aspects that made it so difficult was Yozora's ability to steal Sora's Keyblade after being imprisoned inside a cage. This removed Sora's ability to attack, guard, and use magic, so having plenty of curative items was a must in order to stay alive. When this happened, dodging was the only line of defense, so learning how to avoid Yozora's numerous attacks became a crucial part of the strategy. On top of that horrible scenario, Yozora also had a move that could decrease Sora's maximum HP, reducing the effectiveness of healing should it not be evaded in time. Outside of these two moves that could feel quite unfair at times, Yozora also had a whole host of other moves to trap and strike Sora multiple times, and immense success took a considerable amount of skill due to how many obstacles must be avoided and overcome. And what was scary is that even upon victory, Yozora barely even seemed fazed about what had happened, suggesting he was holding back, a scary prospect for the future. And with that, I think we're done. They were 7 incredibly hard super bosses that we're pretty confident you did not beat first time. Let us know in the comments below which you found to be the most frustrating, and of course, if you enjoyed the video, please be sure to hit the like button and subscribe to our channel. Alright guys, this is Daryl signing out. I hope to see you all again soon for more Kingdom Hearts goodness.